Hi, everybody. Welcome to PhotoFest, the virtual edition. This is our second session for today. My name is Kate Haley. I work with Glazer's Camera, running all the events for the store, and I've been hosting all of these sessions all week. Today is our second session of the day. We have two more after this. It's been a whirlwind of so many different topics. This morning we were talking about sports and photojournalism, and now we're going to talk about wedding and elopement photography and portrait photography. Our guest for this session is Will Khoury, which he's going to correct me on the pronunciation of his last name in a moment. He is based out of Northern California, and he is going to tell us a little bit about his journey as a photographer. And he has spent some time working with one of the newest Hasselblad cameras, the X1Dii 2, and he's going to tell us a little bit about his experience, share some images, and kind of how that camera really helped make some of these images happen that he's going to share. But it is beyond that. It's beyond just the camera. It's about the story of the images and how his approach is to photography. So, Will, could you tell us a little bit about you?
Thank you so much for having me, Blazers and Hasselblad. My name is Will Khoury, and I'm an adventure elopement and portrait wedding photographer based out of California. I've been doing photography full-time for the past 5 years, and I travel to many countries doing it for fun as well as for work. Portrait photography is where it all started for me. I enjoyed taking photos of people in their environment, working or doing what they normally do. And over the years, this passion of photographing people, traveling, and storytelling merged into um, destination elopement and wedding photography. And that's pretty much what I've been doing for the past 5 years, and I love it so much.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I do want to let folks know we do have Ryan Unger on the line who is with Hasselblad. So during the session, if you have like super technical questions about any Hasselblad cameras, he's also going to be able to help answer those questions. During the session, if you have questions throughout, don't be shy. Post those questions in the Facebook comments on the live feed or in our YouTube chat, and we're going to ask as many of those as we can. We have just a little under an hour left to have this conversation, so I'm going to send it back over to Will to share his images, share these stories, and talk a little bit about his process.
Thank you so much, Kate. So today I'll be talking about the Hasselblad X1Dii, and this is the camera right here. Apart from telling stories, I also love gear and the technical side of photography because it's not only your experience as a photographer that matters on the photos, but it's experience with your gear that could change the outcome of what you capture. Apart from anticipating crucial moments on wedding days, you have to understand that lighting, lenses, different settings, and be able to make decisions in split seconds to take that photo and tell the story. So everything comes into play. With the Hasselblad X1D2, everything from portability, ease of use, and image quality is there. One of my favorite things to do during any session is to be able to be more intentional and slowing things down. And with the X1D, it's the perfect camera for that. The camera is a mirrorless medium format, and definitely for photographers who are looking to finesse their work and be a lot more intentional with what they're shooting. Part of slowing down is great because you become so much more aware of your surroundings and you create images that have so much more magnitude. And I think the X1D2 is perfect for that because it does not get in the way of creating beautiful photos. It's a great tool to give your artwork a push, and no matter what you're photographing. So first of all, this camera feels great in your hand, and it definitely doesn't feel like you're holding a medium format. And that's one of the best things about it. It is super ergonomic and it feels awesome. Even some compact full frame cameras um, are bigger than the size of this, and it could be cumbersome, but this is not the case with this camera, which is what I love most about it. And I'm actually gonna share my screen just to give you a better idea about that. Let's see. And let's try to share screen. Awesome. And Kate, are we okay on the sharing screen?
Yep, it looks good.
Awesome. So this is the camera, and I will mainly be talking about the 80 millimeter and the 45 millimeter in combination with the X1D2. These two lenses were my favorite to use, and the 45 is a little bit of a wider look, and the 80 millimeter is more of my portrait lens, and to get more of that depth of field. You can see here the camera does not have a lot of buttons, and it is so easy to use, and I love that it's minimal. Even the menu is super clear, and the touchscreen on it is super easy to use. You can quickly navigate to anything you want in the camera without having the camera get in the way. So it makes things a lot easier to get to the settings that you're looking after. Okay, let me just share more photos from this. Okay, we'll start with this shot from an elopement that I photographed in March, and this was on the coast of California. When I'm photographing destination or adventure elopements, my gear plays a huge part in the experience of telling stories and capturing moments. I don't want anything to weigh me down because we're either hiking or having to walk far to get to that location. In this shot, we wanted to go down to the beach, and we had to run down like a very narrow and steep path to get to the beach. We literally had to chase light and to get the most out of this what was left in the day, basically. This was shot during blue hour, which is right after sunset, which is why the ISO was bumped to 3200. And from this image, there wasn't any much noise reduction done in post. It was already clear out of the camera. It was able to render colors so well without losing image quality. This was photographed on the 80 millimeter from far enough to capture more of the scene and the coast. The lens is capable to drop down to f1.9, but I shot this at 2.8 to make sure that I don't have to continue refocusing on the couple as they were walking toward the camera. I selected these settings to create a balance between the available light, freezing any movement, and having the couple stay in focus. Let me go to the next shot. Here's another shot from the same day. This was photographed in the afternoon. It was light overcast day, and it was really about this camera that I'm able to maintain the highlights and shadows without any problem. The camera is capable of capturing an extreme wide dynamic range and up to 14 stops of with 16-bit color depth. So for me, I'm able to photograph this in the middle of the day without having to worry about any of the shadows or highlights clipping. The camera can really handle the situation without a problem. If you notice here, this was shot at ISO 100 because I wanted to lower the amount of light coming into the camera without bumping up my f-stop, because I really wanted that separation between the subject and the background. This is just to create a balance between both, since the background was a little bit busy. And go to the third one. So with this session, I wanted to take things back to where I started with photography. This is my friend Jason. He's a professional welder, and he builds his own motorcycles out of his garage for fun. I photographed Jason before, and I knew who would be the perfect subject for photographing with the X1D2, and this would be something that would fuel my passion for environmental portraits again. The experience with the camera is something that changes how we photograph people or anything in front of us. And I know with this camera's capabilities, I'm able to capture detail and maintain so much color and keep the beautiful light in any photo. This shot was fully backlit and it was all done with natural light. There were no reflectors or any off-camera flash. Um, the original shot was, of course, dark to maintain that backlight, but you can pull back the shadows in editing, and which create like dynamic range from the camera and create this dynamic scene as well for the photo. This was shot on the 45 millimeter, and it's a great environmental portrait lens because it captures so much of the frame without distorting the surroundings, and keeping enough separation makes your subject pop. Okay, I'm going to go to the next shot. This was another shot of Jason, and this was photographed in his garage where he builds his motorcycles. There are so many layers to this photo, and I just love how the light coming in from the door frames him. This photo is more about Jason than his bikes or the space. When working with so much detail and small parts you need to be aware for possible distractions in the frames, it's good to be able to see everything on the screen or the viewfinder. So before taking this shot, I was able to look through the viewfinder and find things that are distracting. And the X1Dii has such a clear viewfinder and back screen that even if you take a test shot, you still be able to notice things on the spot. So you can move things as needed from your scene if you're in a semi-controlled environment. This is also helpful when you're in this environment to have to move things around so that you don't worry about things later on in editing. So the X1Dii is a mirrorless camera, and with that, you'll be able to see in the viewfinder how the image would look like in the viewfinder before you click the shutter button. And that's exactly what I mean by able to slow things down and be more intentional with shooting. You don't have to do any guesswork when it comes to your settings or anything like that. You can get it right before shooting. The clear viewfinder and the back screen are able to see things on the spot, adjust the environment and your settings as needed, and then go from there. And for me, it's all about getting it right in camera and not have to rely on post-production to make it better or have to remove any distractions in the frame. And I will move to the next shot. Okay, so with this portrait session, this is with my friend Stephanie Danielle. She's a very successful content creator out of San Francisco. And honestly, with this session, it was more about having fun with the camera and testing the capabilities of it in general. This was one of the early sessions that I photographed with the camera, so it was still like testing what the capabilities of it for me. So from color rendering to details, portability, and this was one of the reasons why I think it's super beneficial to shoot medium format, specifically mirrorless medium format. Apart from portability and color range, you're getting medium format quality and shooting at 50 megapixels. I love how much detail you get out of these sensors and the camera. So I'm going to move into 100% crop and give you an idea of what that would look like and how far you can zoom in without losing any quality. Okay. So this is just another shot, and I hope this looks good on YouTube. So being able to zoom in without much losing quality is a great way to change how the image is shot, and just by changing the crop, basically. Of course, this isn't the best crop, but for demonstration purposes, even from that far away, you can still capture great details. So I'm going to switch back and forth between both shots. And that's just getting close to her eyes. And there's so much detail in there that even if it's cropped this close, you'll still be able to get a good print out of it.
That's what we call in the world pixel peeping.
Yeah. I knew people would probably enjoy seeing something that's that close.
Well, but it does help illustrate how having that larger sensor can be beneficial. A lot of times we
Absolutely.
think about, full frame, like people are like, why do I want full frame? Well, more information, more detail, bigger prints. Medium format, even more
Absolutely.
information, more detail, bigger prints. So,
Yeah,
that is a consideration depending on what your goals are, what your clients need, and all of that. So,
absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah, it's actually
Um,
substantial. You've got a 70% more sensor area than a full frame DSLR sensor.
yeah, it's a lot more information. So,
yeah.
Will, do you want to go for a couple of quick questions?
Yeah, absolutely. If there are any questions, please send them my way.
Okay, yeah. I've just been kind of letting you talk a little bit. There's been a couple that have come in so far, and
Okay. I can go back to any photo as needed.
okay, well, I'll let you make that call based on the questions too. So I know you've shown at least a couple of shots with the 45. Are you using the new 45P or the original 45?
I'm using the original, the
Okay.
3.5, this one right here. If I don't know if you can see me, but this lens right here.
With that in mind, Ryan, I guess one comment was about the shutter is quieter on the newer version of the 45. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, that's correct. So the 45P is going to be lighter, quieter, and the 45 3.5 millimeter is going to be really, you get a little bit more light. The aperture is a little bit faster, a 3.5 versus the 4. Both great lenses.
Okay. And so in the world of full frame, because most people are kind of in that mindset, is that about a 30? Am I getting my math really wrong there?
Yeah, I'd say that sounds close.
Okay. I used to know those better because back in my film days, I shot a lot of medium format. But yeah, okay, cool. So, Will, maybe we can talk with you a little bit about this. For more candid moments, could you talk about the speed and focusing with the X1D2?
Absolutely.
Okay, if I can actually interject, it's actually closer to a 35.
Okay. All right. I wasn't sure quite how off my math was. I was guesstimating.
You were
So
close. You
I
were
was
close.
close. Okay. Um, Will, in your experience
Yeah.
so far with the X1D2, um, how was the reaction time with focusing and speed in moments where there might be a little bit of movement?
Yeah. So with this, of course, you're going into a higher sensor and a bigger sensor to capture information. So from if you're expecting to shoot sports with this and it's something that's super fast, I think that might not be the ideal camera for you. But if you're looking to something that's like on wedding days, I think it's super good to have that sensor just for the quality, but also the speed on this. You can capture 2.5 photos a second with it. And I know that sounds slower than the normal like full frame cameras, but it's still capable of stopping motion without a problem. Of course, with a bigger sensor, your photos are much bigger than what a full frame camera is, so it takes longer for it to process. And what I feel like is this camera would be ideal not for times when there's like a lot of movement and a lot of things happening at the same time. And so you want to be like in a semi-controlled environment to be able to make sure that you're not missing out on either focusing or anything like this. The focusing is super fast with it, and being a mirrorless camera, you're getting direct to sense like subject to sensor type focusing instead of through a mirror or another focusing setup. So you'll be able to see it. The camera has pixel peaking, which is really good if you want to override the focusing with like manually and then take the shot. So I honestly feel like it would be super ideal for wedding days. And of course, for me, this would be a secondary camera. You'd photograph with something that's a little bit faster. And then for the times when you're doing portraits, let's say family portraits or the couple portraits, you can go into this camera without a problem since you have that ability to slow things down.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm curious, Ryan. I would bet that the person who asked that originally might be curious on the frames per second. Ryan, could you talk about how many frames per second? I mean, the files are significantly larger than a traditional full frame or mirrorless crop sensor camera. So you'd need faster memory cards to help keep up with that. You're going to need bigger hard drives for storage. And we can talk about computer power and editing software and that kind of stuff in just a moment. But Ryan, what's the frames per second on the X1D2? Just for curiosity's sake.
If you're shooting it raw, it's 2.7.
Okay. Okay. So I do have questions so far on editing, and I know you guys have a standalone app. What is it called? Focus? Am I getting that right?
That's right. Focus with the PH.
Okay. See, there's some stuff in this brain. I'm happy about that. But you know, Will, I think people would be interested in hearing your workflow with dealing with these larger files. Has anything shifted in your process? And maybe you could talk a little bit about your workflow from the shoot to getting the files onto your computer, storage, and that kind of thing. Would you be comfortable sharing a little bit of your workflow with our audience today?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like you mentioned, the file sizes are significantly larger than a normal full-frame camera. So each raw photo is close to 100 to 110 megabits. So with that, you need a larger processing speed and more memory to keep things running smoothly, of course. From the get-go, the camera has dual memory card slots. So for me, it's good to record on 2 cards, just for that backup in case one card fails. But I actually don't use Focus. I use Lightroom, and things can go in there without a problem. So with using this camera, I don't want to interrupt my original workflow process. If you go and put these files directly into Lightroom, they will work just fine without any problem, as long as your Lightroom is up to date and is able to read these files. So they're really, other than knowing that these are larger files, there is not a whole lot of change to the workflow by using a medium format camera.
Well, I do wonder, I know that for me, one person's comment was they had an old MacBook Pro that was just a 2014, and now they're on a 2019. Like, I have a 2013 MacBook Pro, and I know that when I load medium format files on there, it definitely slows things down because my computer's pretty old. So,
Yeah.
you know, that could end up being a consideration, is that with bigger files, depending on the age of your computer and that kind of thing, how much processing power you have and local storage along with using externals, you might have to kind of consider that when you're shifting to a larger format system.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm on a 2016 iMac, and for part of my workflow is that when I go into Lightroom, I have my files on an external drive, but I build smart previews, and then I take the files offline. So it's processing a smaller file size, but not thinking about the full render of the file. With that, I don't have to worry too much about the speed. I did notice like a little bit of it slowing down, and that's probably the computer's issue, not anything else, but understandably so because these files are larger. But they would still edit just like they would edit with the full render, with them being online. And that's just the best way to kind of keep the speed without having to worry about it reading a full file on the computer.
And the smart
So
previews in
basically, you've got
Lightroom is
106 megs on average for the 3FR raw file, which is the Focus raw file, which you're going to get the most out of your editing. The JPEG is going to be anywhere from 5 to 25 megs, depending on the setting. And then the TIFF 8-bit is going to be larger. That's 154 megs. I'm running a 2015 Mac, and I show no difference in using, my other DSLR. But the files are larger.
right. And then, I mean, the tip on the smart previews is super helpful because that's actually what I do in my workflow as well. Because I'm editing on a laptop, so before you know it, you're out of space. So having the originals on externals, just makes your life a little bit easier in that way.
Yeah.
So you said you weren't using Focus right now. is that at all, or have you played around with it on an iPad? I know maybe Ryan, you could talk about Focus with the iPad because I believe that's an add-on option for some places. Maybe you guys could enlighten us a little bit about using Focus with the iPad and that kind of thing.
Yeah, so I think I'm gonna direct this to Ryan because I have not used Focus at all, but I know that there's a capability to go from the camera directly into the iPad if you're shooting on a studio setting and you need like direct proof of the photos, then you can have that. But as far as using the app itself, I think I'm gonna direct that to Ryan just to go over that a little bit.
Yeah, that's fine. So yeah, that's a great question. So being that the X1D2 is such a compact, lightweight, portable camera, it's logical that we made it connect directly to the iPad Pro. It connects. Focus Mobile 2 is the software that is on the iPad Air 2019 and iPad Pro 2018 Plus. Which services the X1D2 and the 907X. That you can tether, capture remote control, edit, export. It's amazing. You're running iOS, so you could literally edit your pictures and then text message your file right afterwards. So it's pretty amazing. If you're talking about the laptop, that's Focus 3.5, and you can tether to the laptop obviously as well. Hope that answered your question.
No, that's great. I was just that was actually Dan Wang, so that was him prompting you to talk about that, I think.
Oh, that's awesome.
So, okay, Will, do you have more images to share and a little bit more story to talk about?
Yeah, actually, the last one that I wanted to talk about after the crop was I have it up on the screen right here. This is exact same spot as this shot, but it was photographed in reverse. So I'm shooting toward the light versus putting Stephanie in a shaded spot with this. For me, I care about if I'm shooting in different angles as well to make sure that it's capable of handling backlighting as well as front lighting. And with this, the sun was hitting the front element of the lens, and it brought in a little bit of sun flares, which is really nice. The black and white rendering with the light hitting the front element was something that's like noticeable, but not to overpower the shot. And that's something that I really like. The camera was still able to focus in that situation, and it was easy to get the eyes tack sharp. So even with that nice like subtle lens flare, and you can probably see it where it continues right here around the hat area. That's where it's only noticeable, but everything else is clear in it. It gave it more of like a filmic and like a dreamy look. And honestly, these are all the photos that I'm sharing today because I wanted to keep things under the hour. But yeah, honestly, this is like something that I love about the camera is that also, like we mentioned this earlier, that it's near silent. So when shooting, it does have the capability of a mechanical and electronic shutter. So you can shift back and forth between them, but even the mechanical shutter is really silent. So it does not interrupt anything that's happening. There's no loud mirror click, and that's something that's very important. When working with people that are not used to being in front of the camera or notice that they're being photographed. So with the choir situation, like especially like during wedding ceremonies or when couples are exchanging vows and it's more of an intimate scene, it really keeps things very silent and you don't have to hear that loud click in the background. And yeah, that's pretty much.
Well, and also when I look at the first photo you showed of this young lady and then the second shot, when I think about photography in general, when I'm out creating images, you know, I've definitely said kind of that same thing where you think about this is what's my scene right now, but turning around and looking at different angles and perspectives and how like this is what's in front of me, but behind me I get this completely different thing. It, you know,
Absolutely.
helps to remind us that we want to just not get that one shot. Let's look around and see what else we can discover and find. So
Yeah, absolutely. And when you were talking about like a wedding day, we really don't have the ability to control so much of where couples stand if it's during a ceremony. So maintaining that dynamic range, if there's like light peeking through trees and creating harsh light spots, we're able to handle that without a problem, um, by having the ability to go with 14 stops of dynamic range. So you won't clip the shadows or highlights at all.
yeah, well, and this shot really just has a lovely effect, like that little halo of light that's happening, like you pointed out. It's just got that rounded from beginning to end with the hat and then that halo towards the bottom. So
Yeah,
it's just
and
really
that was
lovely.
pure luck, honestly. I did not notice it until editing, but
Right.
it kind of fills in the area where it continues with the hat. It just came out nice. And I'm not sure if that has any effect to do with the hat at all, being reflecting the color opposite of it,
It's
or the
probably,
light opposite on the lens. But the sun was right above
yeah.
the hat, so that could have played part in getting that type of flare.
Yeah, it's a combo of those elements and the little lens flare. So anyhow, it's just really lovely. It's really lovely. So
Thank you.
um, I do you have anything else you want to share or any wrap up comments? We don't have any other questions that have come in. So
Okay.
if you have any other thoughts that you wanted to share or um, process that you wanted to talk about, we could take a few minutes
No,
to do
it's,
that.
I mean, this camera going from a full frame to a medium format is definitely bringing up um, more information in my work, and I'm able to deliver better quality photos, which is really good. So um, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen actually. Awesome. So yeah, that's just bringing in so much more quality. With most of my couples, I want them to print and be able to hang photos on walls. So with this, I mean, you can do it with any camera, but with this, I'm able to give them so much more option to crop the photo in different ways to display in what works best for their walls, basically. Um, but as far as like the camera and how I'm using it, it's honestly just something that's I don't notice the heavier weight, and it's not like anything that when you think of a medium format camera, it's not weighing me down whatsoever. It goes in my workflow without a problem, and it's just a really smooth transition going from one camera to another. Even if it's from a full frame or crop sensor, you definitely notice a huge difference with that jump, but it's something that's super easy to use. And once you get your hands on it, it's like you're very familiar with it because it's so simple. And that's what I love about it. It does not get in the way of trying to figure out settings or anything else. It's just all right there.
So let me ask a couple more questions just popped in.
Yeah.
So are you doing any skin retouching like the portraits of that young lady? Um, do you feel like the file size helps you give you more information for retouching?
Yes.
And I'm guessing that you're not actually doing that retouching in Lightroom. You might be going to Photoshop for some of that.
No, actually, it's with what I'm shooting, I want things to stay as real as possible. If there's like something that's very noticeable, I will remove it. But honestly, with those, none of them went into Photoshop. Everything was done in the clone or heal tool in Lightroom. Um, but that's pretty much it. Nothing goes into Photoshop like for like doing like high pass editing. I don't do any of that because I don't want, specifically with wedding photography, I don't want my couples to look like they don't recognize themselves in their photos. But of course, if there's something that they are paying attention to and want specific retouching on, I'm able to do that. But being that it's a 50 megapixel camera and you can zoom in so much and see so much more, then things will start popping out. And then you fall into this editing thing that you're just needing to clean things up to where it becomes unreal, which kind of defeats the purpose of wedding photography. So um, the simple answer, these are not edited in Photoshop, and they're only like lightly retouched in Lightroom, nothing else.
Okay. When you went out for that elopement shoot in the hills and all of that and did that hike, did you do any landscape shots with that or did you try any landscape stuff? I know that
I
you're
do
kind of,
have a few, but I don't know if I can pull them up
no, no, no,
as
you don't.
quickly right now.
You could just talk
Um,
about the experience of, since you are primarily a portrait person, could you talk a little bit about the experience of working with it for landscapes? You don't have to.
Yeah, honestly, thinking about the photo with them in the background as far as the landscape, usually whenever we're going to a location with a couple, and if there's a background, I will photograph that background on its own just to have that extra shot that I delivered to the couple to remind them of what the scene was. Something that I notice a lot is when we're shooting in the middle of the day, if there is a little bit of clouds, the highlights are kind of being blown out. And then you have to focus on the ground to make sure that everything is in detail. So with, let's say, a full frame camera, you might have to end up doing an HDR photo to maintain all of these type of shots. And with this, one shot is okay to be able to bring back these highlights and bump up the shadows to see more detail. So it doesn't go into an HDR look where it's kind of like a surreal look, but it's still able to maintain it as much as like um, true to what it was. And that's the best part about it, like having that capability with color range as well.
Awesome. And then for the black and white shot, one person's super curious. Is that just a process that you did in Lightroom, or did you have any filters or presets that you were using for the black and white conversion on that young lady?
I have my own presets, and that's what was applied to it. And there wasn't any further processing from there. There was a few adjustments on like radial adjustments to bring up more of the center of the image. And let me reshare it very quick to just point out where it was the retouching. Okay, so it was applied all like there was no additional filters except the radial filter where it was done right around her face to bring up a little bit more and bring back the shadows. Everything else was still the same. You can see from this right here and how bright the sun was just around the edge. And I mean, with it being backlit, everything is even in the shadows, which makes it easier for editing and you don't have to touch up any like highlight spots.
All right, great. I think that's good there. We've got someone who's curious about the previous version. So maybe Ryan, I'm going to shoot this question over your way because I don't believe Will has shot with the original X1D. So Ryan,
Not, no.
could you talk about, we have someone who's having some issues when they're doing candids at weddings. So maybe you could share tips on the focusing for those more rapid moments. They're using the X1D, the original one, and the 65 millimeters. So Brian, maybe could you give us a couple of tips on that combination and how they might get the most out of focusing in those moments?
That's a great question. I don't have the X1D first version on me, and I've been using the X1D2, so it's a little bit difficult for me to answer that. If you want to email me afterwards, I can take that offline and get an answer for you.
Okay, that sounds like a good plan. For those who are asking, oh, he is on an X1D2. I'm sorry. He just commented to say he's on the X1D2. Brian, I think what makes sense is I'll get you connected with Brian and you guys can chat a little deeper about that. Okay?
Yeah, sounds good.
Does anybody else have any questions for Will about his process or stories of his images? Please let us know. We're just going to have a couple more minutes here, and then we're going to wrap our session up.
I want to chime in about the question with focusing on candidates.
Okay.
One thing that's really ideal for me is turning on focus peaking and changing the color of the type of focus peaking and what you see in the scene. So you can go, I believe, orange, blue, or white, or red, and to override that focusing manually, because then the camera's not searching for what it wants to focus on, because there could be a lot happening in the scene or people moving just in general. So with focus peaking, you'll be able to go to it manually and just click the shutter button without having the camera take that time to process and then missing out on those candid shots.
All right, that's great. Sorry, I'm giving these guys my email address so I can get everybody connected.
Awesome.
So You played with the 45 and the 80, is that correct, Will?
Yes.
Is there another lens in that lineup that you think you might have wanted to try, or were those kind of the lenses that are best suited for the work that you're normally doing?
Um, they're the best suited for my work because, like you mentioned, the 45 conversion to a full frame is a 35 millimeter, and it's what I'm most comfortable with for like a mid range. So you get a little bit of the scene as well as enough for portraits. And the 85 kind of translates into closer to a 60. So my other full frame lenses are an actual 85 or 50. So it's somewhere in between there. And they're just really good to kind of create that separation. So the last one that I tried was the 90 millimeter, and it was so close to the 80 that I find myself going back to the 80 more often. But the 80 f1.9 was great for that separation and bokeh in general.
Yeah, that's actually my go-to focal length if I'm shooting medium format, something in that range. And in the history of Hasselblad, the first Hasselblad camera I had access to was, I think, a 500C or CM. I can't remember the model specifically, but 80 millimeter, that was always the go-to on those cameras back in the day. And that's film, folks, not digital. That is film.
Yeah.
Anyhow, I just want to take a moment. Okay, one more quick question, and then we will wrap this up. Have you, the sessions that you did with this camera, or in general, how much posing did you do? How much posing did the subject know to do? Like, one shot you have a girl who probably models a fair bit, and then the other shot is a guy who's a welder and motorcycle builder who probably does not know how to pose himself. So my guess is you probably do some posing and direction. Maybe could you share a couple of tips on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's exactly what you said. So Jason, he actually is not very comfortable to be in front of the camera. So there was quite a bit of like posing on where to sit and where to look and things like this. So it's very, I don't call like too much posing, but I wanted to still make him feel natural. If you take somebody who does not like to be in front of the camera and you start telling them to do things that are uncomfortable, then that's gonna show in your shot. So I tried to keep it as comfortable as possible without having him to do crazy stuff. I mean, you want the photo to look natural. And with Stephanie, she has a lot of experience being in front of the camera, but she's also not a model. So she likes direction, but also she is not gonna like pull up with their own poses and go from there. So there's still a little bit of direction that needs to happen. And of course, in general, as a photographer, you are going to give direction to work with whatever light you're having. So that's just like the general feel of everything. I don't usually do a lot of posing, except when there's like specific light that needs like moving the subject in the right way where it's the most flattering way. But other than that, it's usually candid and in the moment type photos.
Yeah, I mean, posing is a key, and like you talked about, when you're working with people who aren't comfortable in front of the camera, you're going to have to put a little bit more work in to help get them
Absolutely.
comfortable and put them in that good light and frame their face and all that good stuff. So,
Yeah.
I know a lot of us have the opportunity to work with models who know how to move themselves, but our everyday clients typically don't. So
Yeah.
that's part of our job,
So
is to help
my
facilitate that.
go-to with that situation is honestly to place them in the right light and make sure that everything environment-wise is ready to me for me to take photos. And then I start just having a normal conversation with them because at that point they're gonna forget about the camera. And once if you're looking for a more serious shot, you just want to have like a quieter conversation. And then if it's a more high energy where you want laughter, you just have a normal conversation and wait for the right moment to click. So you just don't want it to be fully silent all the time. So
Right.
it's that's when it becomes super awkward and they'll become like self-conscious of what's happening.
Oh yeah, you have to keep that conversation flowing, and I
Yeah.
think one of my favorite things to do is to capture moments when they don't think I'm capturing moments, because those
Yeah.
moments in between when they think they've smiled for you, but maybe that smile was awkward, but then you caught the natural smile in the next frame and they don't know you did that. And then they see it and they're like, when did you do that? You know,
Yeah,
those are my favorite moments for sure.
absolutely. Yeah, it's you take a picture and then you wait for them to relax after, and the second one is the one that usually gets delivered because then they're much more relaxed.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, we're kind of wrapped up on questions. Will, thank you so much for
Awesome.
participating in PhotoFest and sharing your work and your experience so far with
Yeah,
X1D2.
thank you so much for having me, and Ryan, thank you again for Hasselblad for having me as well.
Yeah, thank you, Ryan and
You're welcome.
Hasselblad.
You're welcome. Before we log off, I just wanted to say that Glazers Hasselblad put together a little raffle and a special offer for all the attendees to say thank you. And there's going to be a little link that's going to be sent from Glazers after this. So feel free to click that link, do the survey, and enter for a chance to win. So thank you.
I was going to say that. So you beat me to the punch. That was my notes to talk about. That's okay.
Don't let me take your light.
No, it's okay. It's okay. I got enough light right here. Big light. So yeah, as Ryan said, there is a little, there will be an email going out after the session if you registered to get a link to that survey with some swag that's going to go out to folks. And there's also a promo if you purchase a Hasselblad camera. There's some stuff you can get for free. But so look for that note for those details. Unfortunately, we can't mention them on air because it's pretty hush-hush. And then I just want to thank, again, Will and Ryan and everyone at Hasselblad for helping to make this happen. We appreciate your support during PhotoFest this year. And before we sign off, I just want to let folks know we have 2 more sessions today, so don't go too far. I know if you're in Seattle, it's raining, so you have no excuse not to tune in for those next 2 sessions and learn lots of cool stuff. We're going to actually talk a little bit more about elopement photography in our next session. And then we have one on wildlife photography later in the day. So we'll be back at, I think, 1 p.m. Sorry. 1 p.m. With our next session. So thank you, everybody, for making this happen. It was really awesome. And everybody enjoy the rest of their day.